Welcome to the Warren Files, presenting true insights and experiences from the paranormal world, with your host, Chris McKinnell, Director of the Warren Legacy Foundation for Paranormal Research. Hello, and welcome to the Warren Files. I'm your host, Chris McKinnell, the Director of the Warren Legacy Foundation for Paranormal Research, and today we are joined by Al Widziewicz. Al is a former Dominican priest and a current psychotherapist. Al, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'm honored.
You know, you have an amazing background, and your perspective on the paranormal, I'm really looking forward to talking to you today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your former life as a Dominican priest?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I graduated from the University of Connecticut, and when I finished college, entered the Dominicans in the late 70s and early 80s, and was in the order for over 14 years. And I left in the 90s to marry, and I have one son. I have degrees in philosophy and divinity, and I really loved being a religious, and especially a Dominican, because the whole focus in the order was on contemplation and prayer and the spiritual life and truth. You know, the motto of the Dominicans is Veritas, which is truth, and I've always sought that, I think, you know, as I understood it, and it was a really good fit for me. And but as in many things in life, you know, I feel like God gave me He gave me two things, and I had to choose, and couldn't do both. Obviously, within the present way the Catholic Church understands, you know, priesthood and religious life. So I left and is married, and we have a son, and but again, I would never ever. My time in the order was extraordinary. I learned so much and met some amazing, wonderful, you know, wise and intelligent, you know, friars and sisters.
And what was your background with the paranormal back then?
Well, you know, in terms of formation, all priests are formed, you know, to have some sense of certainly, obviously, the supernatural, but also the demonic. And, you know, so for example, in confession class, where you learn how to, you know, hear confessions and stuff like that, you're taught about doing you know, praying under your breath if you feel like there's anything demonic or evil that has attached itself to somebody who's in the confessional. Or when you encounter people in other settings, like, well, for baptisms, for example, all baptisms have an exorcism that's attached to it. You know, where the you know, the devil is sort of cast out, you know, original sin and all that sort of thing, and, you know, return to original grace. And so, you know, in the order, I mean, there was obviously lots of talk about that since. I don't know if you've ever heard of a book called the Malleus Maleficarum, but I think that's the right. Yeah, that was written by a Dominican in the Middle Ages. And so the Dominicans, through periods that were helpful, like, you know, and then through periods that were really more questionable, like the Inquisition, but they really were involved in casting out demons or trying to help people spiritually. You know, and I like to think that it was, you know, although there were excesses and abuses, that's for sure. There also were, I think, you know, there were a lot of guys and women as well, you know, in terms of nuns and sisters, that their intention was to help people, you know, not, you know, I think of a special one whose name was Bartolomé de las Casas. Bartolomé de las Casas was a friar in Latin America who advocated for the indigenous people, and he, you know, in fact, a lot of other religious orders and different priests and whatnot thought that the indigenous people were somehow demonic because they had a different spiritual world that they believed in, and Bartholomew did not believe that, you know. So it was a very progressive, certainly for that period, that's for sure. So,
you know, one of the things I have to ask you about. I have run into so many, especially Catholic priests, who don't even believe in the devil, let alone demons.
Yeah, I have too. My sense of that intuitively is that it's more about fear than belief. I don't think they want to. I think there's a fear of it, you know, of Satan or the devil or demons or even a fear of in some ways of a spiritual life becoming manifest in this world, you know. Yeah, but it's true. I have encountered priests that don't believe in that. They think that they've sort of bought into the psychological model of of Freud, really, that all of this is just a projection of our own desires or libido or whatever else it is, and that it's not real. That there's no real demonic activity, that it's all mental illness, or it's all, something like that, Yep. And that's, and at least in my experience, some of them are, surprised when they do encounter, demonic and or spiritual experiences. Although it's funny because those same priests will believe in the sort of the light side of the whole thing, in terms of saints and angels and God. Well, at least I hope they do.
No, I agree with you. That's what always surprised me. How can you believe in one and not the other? It's yin and yang.
Exactly. Which kind of leads to the whole idea of how that all works. The whole supernatural. Yep.
Back to this point though, if somebody is in trouble and they believe that it's demonic.
Yes.
And I will also caution our listeners that it's almost never demonic.
That's right.
It's usually your fear that's projecting something far worse onto what is probably just a human spirit.
That's right.
If even that.
That's right.
But if you do believe that it is a horrible, horrible thing, what is the process to get help from the Catholic Church? If you're a Catholic.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the first place you go to is your local parish and contact the priest there. And again, it's the luck of the draw there, whether you find someone that will be responsive or not. I would present as reasonably as possible. I mean, and then you might even just ask him to come over and bless the house, or because I've been asked to do that many, many times, and just
there are a lot
to say
of priests
that
who won't do that anymore.
Yeah, that's really true. Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, with the diminution in numbers, with the numbers falling, some of them have 3 or 4 parishes to take care of, and I'm not trying to defend it, but it really is true that some will not. They don't want to bother with it. That's really, really true. Or they don't want to deal with it. But if
your priest is not willing to listen to you, what would your next step be?
What I would do is actually, because you'll find them a little bit more open, going to a religious order, Franciscans, Dominicans, Carmelites, because the tradition of the religious orders is well, dare I say this word, deeper than secular diocesan priests. They might have more experience or time, for that matter, because they do live in community, and sometimes their apostolates are not as time consuming as a diocesan priest. You could try that, Benedictines, and talk, go to a monastery or a priory or a friary and see if you can find someone there that will talk to you. Or I would ask the question, is there anybody that you could recommend that you know of? And diocesan priests tend to be in a very small geographical location, diocese, obviously. So Bridgeport or New York, even though New York is large, it's still a geographical location. Whereas religious, because they belong to an order that's worldwide, there's going to be somebody that they know of, you know what I mean? That'll deal with that, and again, being as reasonable and as, if it's a very subtle thing, they might dismiss you. But if they perceive that you are serious and scared and concerned for your family, I think a lot will just help. And I think that's, regardless of whether you're a Catholic or not. I mean, again, you'll find priests that won't help you if you're not Catholic, but
Yeah.
but in my experience anyway, I've known of, if somebody came to seek me out, I couldn't care less whether they were Catholic or not,
Well,
so.
Al, you're a special guy.
Oh,
Most of the priests I've dealt with, if you're not a Catholic, they will not help.
Yeah, sadly,
Fortunately.
yes.
They're very, and I've even worked with exorcists who've told me, if I feel the church is going to be hurt by this, I'm backing out.
Yeah, that's right.
First.
That's right. Well, clearly, especially in the United States, but worldwide, the image of the church and causing the church any scandal has had too much of an influence on people's decisions, and like anything else, it's a political organization. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And you don't want to be known as that kind of fringe priest that but you will find there are still a lot of really, really extraordinarily good and whole and holy guys and women as well, sisters that will help in the
there's such a mixed message from the Catholic Church, because on the ground level, it's very hard sometimes to get that help you want. But
yes.
If you listen to the Pope and the Vatican,
Mm-hmm.
they're constantly talking about the need for more exorcists and the danger of Satan and his minions. So it's almost as if the ground forces are not listening to the generals.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. I think that's exactly right. And also, like anything else in whether it be take like a hospital, for instance, you're going to find some people that are administrators, and that's what they do, and they're not that interested in the actual healing of people. And then you'll find some other physicians that are truly healers. Do you know what I mean? That are interested in
Absolutely.
They're not just technicians or administrators, but actual healers. And that, I think that's human.
So I guess the point is, don't give up if you're in trouble.
Yes, that's exactly right. Don't give up, and again, seek out, keep seeking out. And sometimes nuns, sisters will be more helpful because they are more, in touch with folks. If you can find some, there are so few these days.
Yes, there are.
Yep.
We do have an order right here, up the street from where I live in Monroe, Connecticut. It's been there for decades and decades. Dominican, as a matter of fact, if I recall correctly.
Wow, nice. Nice.
So now you're a psychotherapist.
I am. Mm-hmm.
That's a terrific transition. And again, you're seeking the truth.
Yes. So, and healing.
With demons, how do you reconcile that? What is your thoughts on demons?
Well, there's the theological perspective or philosophical perspective that I've always had, and then there's the how it encounters psychology. And the theological philosophical perspective is pretty much from Thomas Aquinas, which is basically that, when God created all this and introduced free will, some entities, whether it be, the angels and archangels or, rebelled, Lucifer and all the demons, and then they did not want to be obedient and didn't want to, they wanted to be God or whatever. Or they just wanted to, it's so funny with all of us, given the opportunity to choose to hurt or to heal. Let's face it, all of us in our lives sometimes choose, not the best path. None of us are perfect. So anyway, and so what that's called in Latin is called privatio boni, the lacking of do good. And in Thomistic theology, evil isn't a opposite equal entity. I think it is in Zoroastrianism and other religions, but in Christianity or in Thomistic thought anyway, it's not. It's the lacking of do good. It's like something missing. These angels just they miss the do good that should be there, and of course as people we have that lacking of good too. So as we get into psychotherapy, I think of it in terms of a campfire. And this has come from Carl Jung, if you look at a campfire and you're camping in the woods with by yourself or whatever, or with people, there's only so much that you can see in the light of the fire. And that's that's what you're conscious of, what you're aware of inside in terms of your psyche. By the way, psyche comes from Greek psyche, which means soul. So a psychotherapist or a psychologist, is, as much as many of them are not believers or whatever, they are healers of the soul. The psychology is the study of the soul, and psychotherapy is the healing of the soul. So nonetheless, absolutely, in this fire, in this thing, what you're aware of is your consciousness. And then there's a lot outside of that, a lot of things that are outside of that light that are unconscious. And I think the demonic, anyway, the way that it tends to work is it tends to kind of get in there when there's something missing, whether adolescence is obviously, everybody talks about the fact that adolescence is a time when obviously there's a lot missing. We're starting to, understand ourselves. And so there can be some spaces in there, some lacking, and that can get filled with entities or whether they be purely, inside our heads, what I mean? Obsessions or somebody can be obsessed with a movie star or whatever, mm-hmm. Or it could be of a darker nature, and that is where somebody, I don't know, plays with a Ouija board, or they decide to read about, witchcraft and cast spells or curses or stuff like that, just again, innocently as kids, but still, that the evil fills those places where there's lacking in them, and where they don't have any protection from it, and then they can become obsessed and then very, very rarely possessed, but mostly it just attaches itself to people, and so where the psychological piece kicks in is that I'm often, when I'm with somebody early on, I'm like, well, what is missing? Where is the lacking of do good? Where is this person's life not whole? And often that's where the psychological work is, but that's also where there's some spiritual work. Sometimes that's important for them to, for their wholeness. I hope that's not too convoluted an answer.
No, not at all. No, that's excellent, and it certainly is what I believe as well.
Oh, good.
You do need, not need. There is always some vulnerability in that person,
yes.
Some negativity that allows this other entity to attach itself to you.
Yes.
And you have to deal with both. You have to spiritually deal with that entity, but you also have to deal with that vulnerability that you as a human being have.
Yes.
And you are in a perfect position to help people with both. I'm very happy that you're a member of the foundation, because we certainly need people like you.
Well, thank you. And I'm proud to be a member of the foundation. And I feel that very often with people, and again, you have to approach them very gently in terms of their own spiritual background or religious background, and obviously I'm not there to proselytize or it's not about religion, but no. it is about filling or healing those vulnerable places or wounds with those lackings with goodness or oneness or truth or beauty or things that will take the place of, make the person more whole, and not allow, things that continue to wound them, to take root and grow, that sort of thing.
Right, and that the way you say it is different than the way I would say it, but it's exactly the same idea. We talk about raising the vibrations.
Exactly.
In a person's psyche, raising the vibrations in a home, with love, laughter, positivity,
yes.
and getting rid of whatever is pulling you down. Keep the home clean, because a clean home, it will allow a free flow of energy, will allow you to feel better, and will raise your good feelings. Whereas surrounding yourself with filth is only going to bring you down.
That's right. And beauty. I think beauty. someone once said, I forget where I heard it, but that beauty is the best argument for the existence of God, because it's not necessary, but it is so persuasive in terms of there being more beyond ourselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It could have been a world without beauty, and yet and yet beauty calls us and it heals us. So having things that call us, beauty, I don't know, fresh flowers or fresh vegetables or growing things, plants, or even just images of stuff. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah, images of the cosmos came to my mind.
yes,
And fresh
yes,
flowers.
yep,
Anything like that is going to make you, if it makes you feel better, is a wonderful thing to add to your home.
yes,
Little fountains with gurgling, burbling water.
yes,
If that makes you
yes,
feel good to hear that, then put that in your home.
yes.
Whale songs, if that's your thing, play
That's right.
them on your
That's right.
sound system.
That's
You
right.
know,
Genuine pieces of art that were created by people who love art. I mean, they not only take a bit of the spirit of the person that created them, but they add to the the whole wholeness. And I mean, we collect colonial santos. There's statues of saints
mhm.
and obviously Mary, Jesus, angels, that kind of stuff that we've been collecting now for 30 years since we left. I was worked in Peru briefly, and I got my first one there. But basically, and we have them around the house in different places. Not too many in the public places because we don't want the place to look like a church. But these santos, these saints, I believe that they, since people prayed with them for centuries, some of them are 300-400 years old. They retain some of the energy and the beauty and the prayers of the people that said them. You know what I mean? I think of it like sort of like
Absolutely.
people have their grandmother's rosary or their the talus. If you're Jewish, your grandfather's talus or whatever. I mean, it retains a kind of wholeness and a blessing.
Absolutely. When you use a religious item, when you use an item that you think of as sacred, and you are imbuing that with your faith over much time, that does become something very powerful.
Yes, that's exactly right. That is exactly right. Yes.
You know,
Yep.
it adds to your faith.
Yes, that's right. That's right. That's why in you know trying to free places from demonic and or evil entities, people often bring in holy water, or they'll bring in the relic of a saint, or the true cross, or something like that, or and because this object has whether it's historically accurate or not, I don't. That's another conversation for another day. But the faith and the belief and the love that has and the emotion that is positive emotion that's gone into this thing is a very strong way to protect you from anything evil, lacking in good.
And I have to ask you, Al, because I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I'm fascinated by quantum physics, and for
Uh-huh.
me, that's all about the energy we're putting into it.
Yes.
As you said, it may not be an actual piece of the true cross. There
Right.
are enough pieces of the true
Right.
cross
Right.
out there to make many, many, many crosses.
That's right. That's right.
Uh, but your faith in it, your
Yeah.
energy
Yeah.
has
That's right.
altered that and
That's
made
right.
that powerful.
That's right. That's exactly right. And if it's something that it's existed, like these santos for many generations, it's the faith and the love of countless people. So it has a certain, perennial and timeless goodness about it,
That
and
brings up
love.
another, yeah, and that brings up another thing. I have found, and there have been actual scientific studies on this, where they've done double-blind studies where they put people on prayer lists.
Yes. Yes.
Half of
Yep.
heart patients on prayer lists and half not.
Yep.
And the ones that are on all of these prayer lists survive much better, heal much
Yes.
quicker.
Yes.
And it's not just anecdotal. It is easy to graph and see the power of prayer.
Yes, that's
and it
right.
doesn't matter if these are Hindu prayers or Buddhist prayers or Christian prayers. It's all of that positive energy being directed at that person or that item that makes it powered.
Yes. No, that's exactly right. Yep. Just one of my experiences several years ago. Friends of ours who are not believers. She's sort of atheist. She's a psychologist. He's an atheist, and he's agnostic. They moved into a house, and within the house there had been a murder suicide, and so they were there for quite a while. And in the basement where this had occurred, there was some. They always felt kind of uncertain and afraid, and but it kind of culminated in one day a police officer came to the door and said, "Oh, there's been a call from here about another murder suicide." And of course, this terrified the daylights out of Jess, out of our friend. And she, even though she's not a believer, she called me and she just said, "Well, could you have to do something because it's scaring me. It's scaring Bill, her husband, and their son."
The police showed up because there'd been
they had received a call that there was another murder suicide in the house. And the phone call was coming from that house, and of course, no one had called. Or whoever had called, or however that had happened, and it felt, no one made the call from inside that house, and this was this was on the cusp of cell phones. So I'm not sure whether it was cell phones or the landline, but nonetheless, they were terrified, obviously, because, and even as in many of these situations, people are not necessarily believers, but when they experience something scary, they, so I went over and I blessed the house with holy water, and I asked me to, and then also I brought over a relic. I think it was a relic of Saint Therese, the little flower, who said she would spend her heaven on earth doing good. So, and just, we sort of like spent time together, in blessing and in community, and we had food, and it wasn't a lot of excessive ritual, but and they were never, nothing ever happened again. And they later moved to Warwick, New York, and they're happily there. So,
and not that you would probably know, but I would be very curious if it was the anniversary of the original murder suicide.
Wow. It very well, it certainly could have been the day or close to it, because the house had been sold after the death, and then they bought it. So, because they were still, starting out and wanted an inexpensive home. But yeah, no, that would have been interesting to find that out. So,
yeah. So I have a philosophical question for you. Mm-hmm. And given that one of your degrees is in philosophy, this should be interesting for both of us. I'm very fascinated by the story of Job in the Old Testament.
Sure.
And the idea of why is evil.
Right.
At the beginning of that story, Satan walks into heaven as a prince of heaven. Right. And he has a conversation with God, and he says, "So I hear that," and I know you know this. I hear you've got this great follower named Job. He's your most faithful follower. Let me test him. Right. And God says, "Okay, you can do anything you want, but don't kill him." Right. And he goes and he kills his family. He kills his animals. Right. He gives them boils. He destroys his life. Right. Here's the philosophical question here. Is Satan, are demons, therefore, part of God's plan? Are they there to test our faith or break us? And if we break, we break. But if not, we come through stronger and we are better able to do God's work. Is that why they're here? Well, there's a lot of ways. The whole problem of theodicy or evil is complex, and I think difficult to understand. That's one way of looking at it, that it's about being tested,
I think the one question I would ask about that is, what does it say about God? It sounds a little mean, to be if God indeed is goodness. My response to that would be, it's more about faith than about being tested. It's more about the reality that all of us are going to go through very difficult things. And are these caused by God or caused by the devil? Who knows? But we're going to go through these things. And how we persevere in that, it's kind of a little bit of like what you're saying, how we persevere in that, how we, I think about the there were Brutal Benelheim was a psychologist after the Second World War, and he did studies of survivors from the Holocaust, from the prison camps, and he found that there were three kind of survivors. One group of people really did crumble mentally, obviously, because of the horror that they both experienced and their families being exterminated. The second group became extremely controlling and neurotic, and again, for good reasons. I mean, if you go through that kind of thing, you're going to develop all kinds of neuroses and psychoses and stuff like that. They became incredibly controlling. Yep. And then the third group, which is maybe the most interesting group, were fine and actually went on to help people. And he himself, was a psychologist and stuff. And so he studied them, and it's like, well, what was it that helped them to be okay? And what he found was that they said to themselves something along the lines of, you know what? These Nazis can take away everything. My family, they can take away my very life, but they can't take away, for as long as I'm alive, they can't take away who I am. They can't take away my soul and my thoughts and my feelings. And they sort of, it was a little bit of a thing, but it gave them hope. And I think that, if we tie it in back with the Job story, Job was the kind of person that hoped. I mean, he, even when all that happened, he continued to hope, even though those people came along and said, oh, it's because you're sinned and you must have done all this kind of stuff, his tempters or friends or whatever they call it in the book. And I think it was about hope and faith. And so the actual,
although he did argue with God at the end.
He did indeed. And who wouldn't? I mean, I've often thought there's a question I never heard anyone answer. Okay, so they take away your everything, and then they give you back a new wife and new children. But really, I mean, that's not equal.
No, it isn't.
What are here's your new wife and your new children. Well, yeah, that's nice, but I really want my, you took away. So, I honestly think these things sort of happen. I don't know that. I mean, God permits them, I guess, but I don't think it's a question of so much testing as because of free will. It's kind of the world that got created.
Right. And that's the thing right there. You just said it. Free will.
Yep.
I have never seen anything done demonically that a human couldn't top.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
If there's evil in the world, humans create the greater portion of it.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. That is exactly right. And that's, and it's yeah, I mean, it is,
to say that God is good. Yes, God is good. God is love, but God is also a creator, and he's created everything. Including, every poisonous viper and everything else that exists.
That's right. Including Satan, including the devil.
Absolutely.
And in fact, according to Catholic theology or Judeo-Christian theology, the devil, in order to exist, you have to have some goodness, and even the devil is good enough to exist. Although that's about it. If something is pure evil, there's absolutely nothing good about it. It ceases to be. Now, again, this is classic, theology. It just it ceases to exist if it's pure evil. That's why often in these movies, and books and stuff like that, it makes it seem like the battle is equal between love, hope, faith, goodness, God, and the devil and demons, and it's not equal.
No, not at all.
Yep.
No, there's only one creator. It's not that the devil is equal to God. The devil, if he's equal to anything, perhaps Saint Michael.
Exactly. Yeah.
The archangel,
exactly.
but certainly not God. And
That's
people get a little confused there, and that's fine.
Yeah. No, right. That's right. Well, it makes a better movie. I mean, because it makes a better movie. It's they just like just like when they show psychotherapy in movies, it's often they show the dramatic stuff and it happens really quickly. You know what I mean? Whereas in real life, like say somebody is depressed, I always think of it as like a giant swamp, and together you and the therapist, sometimes with the help of medication or whatever, you walk out of the swamp together. And that is it's a long slog. If you're in a swamp up to your hips and then up to your thighs and then up to your knees and you're slowly walking out of the swamp, it is not fun, and it's slow and but it can be done. And I've seen, and that's where the transformation takes place, and
I think that's why the world isn't perfect. Because if everything was easy, if everything was fine, we would never need to progress beyond babyhood.
That's right.
We need to grow. Otherwise, how are we building a relationship with God?
Yes.
How are we building just any relationship if there's not adversity to overcome? How do we become more mature, more compassionate, more empathetic? If we've never suffered, how can we understand the suffering of others?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Suffering makes us empathetic. It makes us compassionate.
It makes us better people.
It does. It makes us who we are, I think, on some level. It's sort of, and maybe that's what happened to Job. It sort of burns away he had everything. So there might have been an arrogance with that. Who knows? Who knows what? I mean, it doesn't talk about it in the book, but it presents him as if he was perfect, but I bet not. And I bet that all this experience the suffering did change him,
Oh, certainly would. Yeah.
Yep. It would have to, obviously,
Now, I don't personally believe that there ever was a Job, not in real life, but as a story to explain the nature of evil.
Yep.
I think it's philosophically perfect, from my mind.
Right. Yes, no, I think the scriptures, the Hebrew scriptures and the Christian scriptures are it's not a history book. It's a book of to communicate deeper truths using story, of course.
Absolutely.
And
that's what Jesus did all the time.
Exactly.
He spoke through stories.
That's right. When he said, "I'm the vine and the branches," he wasn't saying he was a plant. He was using a metaphor, So. Yep, and he was wrong. I mean, it's funny because I started my college career in horticulture, and when Jesus said that the mustard seed is the smallest of all seeds, he's absolutely wrong. There are many seeds. Orchid seeds are infinitely smaller than mustard seeds. So
there may not have been orchid seeds in the Middle East at that time.
I think that's entirely right. There probably were not a lot of orchids growing in Palestine, But that being said, he didn't know. So,
well, or he did, but he had to speak to his audience in a way that they would understand.
That's another question: the nature of whether
I'm always fascinated by the idea. There's a theory that when he left the Holy Land, that one of the places he ended up was India.
Right.
That's right. Not that there's any proof of that, but I would love to think that he had gotten some spiritual guidance there. That would fascinate me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all of these spiritual teachers, many of them came from the Middle East or the East, and including him. Or even the stories of Mary and Mary Magdalene and Lazarus, going to France and that kind of stuff. I mean, the fact, or the apostles, going, St. Thomas going to India, and there's no historical proof for any of this, but I think it certainly communicates the proliferation of wisdom, and how that, and maybe some of them did, who knows, maybe some of them were, inspired.
Well, he did say go out into the world.
Yep. And I mean, certainly during the first couple centuries, it was persecuted by the Romans. So maybe they wanted to try, go someplace less, hot.
So this is a paranormal podcast. So what have been some of your experiences?
Yes. Well, I can tell you one from when I was a priest. I had just been ordained, and I was assigned to a parish. And as the youngest, friar in the house, I was assigned to the 6 a.m. Mass. Blessedly, they don't seem to have these 6 a.m. Masses anymore. But anyway, it was really early. And so I got up and put on my habit, and I walked down, and I went into the church. And it was an old church, like an old Gothic church. And I was getting ready, and and I looked out, and from the sacristy you could see the altar and both the Vatican II altar and then the high altar, the old altar from before the Vatican Council. And I looked out, and I see this priest facing the old altar, celebrating Mass, in the old rite, like in Latin, and he was just sort of there. Sort of celebrating Mass. And my first thought was, are you serious? What are you doing there? And I need to, set up. And I was kind of annoyed, frankly, and confused as to what he was doing there, why he was celebrating Mass in the, pre-Vatican II rite. So I said, well, I'll do something else. And I don't know, I vested or whatever I did. And like a minute later, I went out onto to go into the church, and of course there was nothing there, and no one was there. So obviously, presided at the Mass, and then went back to the priory, and I'll never forget, it was a friar, and I said to him, an older guy, and I just said to him, I just had the weirdest experience. I said, I walked into the church, and I'm half asleep, but I looked out and I saw this old man, celebrating Mass. And he said, oh, that's Father, some Irish name, I forget what the name is. Oh, that's Father so-and-so. We've all seen him. I'm like, really? And evidently there was a friar there that used to take Mass stipends, money from people to celebrate Masses for the dead or for, a particular intention. And he never said any of the Masses. He just took the money, and he died. And so the story, the myth, the story or whatever was that he would, in his purgatory or the afterlife or beyond the veil, whatever you want to call it, that he was often seen celebrating these Masses after his life. So it was kind of a interesting. It wasn't scary or anything, but it was certainly a supernatural experience. No.
So now, as a psychotherapist, you're also dealing with the paranormal.
Yes. Often, I'll get referrals from other people because they'll have someone that will have an experience of seeing someone who's died, or having a visitation from someone who's died, or having a sort of a spiritual experience that scares them. And, often regular psychotherapists or regular people just don't know what to do with these things. And often, again, coming from the tradition of Freud, that everything is just a projection and there's no afterlife and there's nothing beyond this. They just dismiss it, or they pathologize it and they say it's schizophrenia, or they're hearing voices, or they make it a mental illness. But often some people will refer them to me if they determine the person is not obviously genuinely schizophrenic or doesn't have a mental illness that is very severe. So anyway, I will meet with them, and I'm often and I'll hear their story, and now I just sort of take it as the story that they're telling me that's giving a reflection of what their experience is. You know what I mean? But more importantly, listening to whether it scares them or not, or whether it, I have a woman that I see regularly that she sees, she sees visions of of spirits or the dead or whatever, and they don't scare her, and they're not threatening, and so that's fine. Yeah, I mean, she just,
Perhaps you should refer her to our psychic support group. We can
that's a
help
good
her with
idea.
that.
Oh, that's a great idea. That is a really great idea. But she and I worked together, and she basically, what's helpful is that she, to have it confirmed that she's not losing her mind. You know what I mean?
Right.
And she's in all other ways, she's absolutely, there's nothing.
Right. And that's the thing. So many people come to us because that's what they think is happening.
Yes.
And they're just overjoyed when they find out that's not the case.
Yes. Yes.
It's okay. It's only a spirit. You are an empath, or
that's right.
You are sensitive.
Yeah.
And for you, your aura burns more brightly, and you're going to attract more spirits than the average person.
Right.
And you just happen to be sensitive enough to perceive them one way or another.
That's right.
That's why I actually formed the psychic support group. I mean, it's grown far beyond my original intention, but originally it was a psychological support group because so many people are overwhelmed by anxiety from all of the emotions they pick up from other people throughout the day, and we were helping them that way.
Wow, that's really good. I will recommend that she join. Yes.
And for anyone else who's interested, it is the Warren Legacy Foundation Psychic Support Group, and you can find it on Facebook.
Nice. Wonderful. Yes.
So what happens when you're dealing with something truly negative in your practice?
Yeah, well, I mean, I have had a client or two where it's difficult to discern whether someone who truly is schizophrenic but is also having experiences that are unexplainable. I mean, it's obviously more difficult because you have to you want to treat the work with the person in terms of their mental illness, like say something like schizophrenia, which is obviously very serious, and medication and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's not that different in the sense if you validate that their experience is real, and just like with anyone else, give them tools to protect themselves and to fill their lives with goodness and wholeness and beauty and joy and love, and that will protect them from the evil that even their mental illness might welcome, or feed, that kind of thing. It's and it's it's not a question of taking away the sickness, because like something like schizophrenia, it never goes away mostly. I mean, I don't, very rarely goes away.
You can control it with some medication.
Exactly.
But you can't get rid of it. Yeah. That's
right. But you can help the person, and then if they're having, to not, if they're paranoid delusions or they're and sometimes it's hard to know. I've had clients that have felt like they have visitations from demons or Satan or stuff like that, and I don't know. You know what I mean. I know. What I listen to is whether anything else is happening. Besides them having this experience. If they're just having the experience, then it's probably more in terms of mental illness. If other things are happening inside their homes or their world or with other people, then it could be more.
Absolutely, and that's an important point. I have a chief medical consultant that I work with, and when you talk to a therapist or a doctor or what have you, it's best not to say I believe it's a demon, but say this is what I'm actually experiencing. This is what people have seen. Excuse me. And for instance, don't say a demon is hurting my foot. Say I have a pain in my foot.
Right.
Or I see things flying across the room. They're breaking into pieces.
Right.
No one is throwing them.
Right.
Don't say a demon did it.
Right. That's right.
Let us come
That's right.
to those conclusions ourselves.
Right.
But just
Right.
because you may have a mental illness does not mean the paranormal isn't real and isn't affecting you.
No, that's
They
right.
go hand in hand very often.
That's right. That's right. In fact, however it works in terms of demons and evil entities, they're obviously going to pick vulnerable people. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
They're going
One
to
way or the
pick.
other.
They're going to prey on, just like somebody who's going to be a thief is going to pick a vulnerable person to attack. Their so too the demon's going to pick someone vulnerable and yeah, and
It's like any predator. They look for the weakest prey.
yes, that's right. That's right. Yep. That's exactly right. And
when we're done talking on the podcast, by the way, I want to talk to you about a case I'm working on now, because I believe we're dealing with someone who is probably schizophrenic with paranoid delusions. But there are other people who are supposedly witnessing things.
Yep. Well, I mean, it's interesting. I have a very good friend that is a physician and a psychiatrist in a mental hospital, and very notable mental hospital, and he said that there is the psyche can be incredibly powerful, and that severely psychotic folks can manifest things. They can do it themselves, or it's possible that there's something beyond them,
Absolutely.
Certainly they have preternatural knowledge. There's no question. I mean, he has said that he's seen it many, 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 many times. Well, somebody will be walking by and who they've never met, and this person will call out something about them that no one could possibly know, something about, just really secret knowledge, and yeah, so,
and you don't have to be mentally ill for these things to manifest.
Yep.
I was in a home. This was an old poltergeist case with a number of children, a lot of internal conflict in the family, and glasses were flying around the room, knives were flying. It was a mess. But we had a bishop come in, Bishop McKenna. And he blessed the home, and everything was quiet for 2 years. And then I went to visit. And I went there with my partner, and they invited us to spend the night. Everything was fine. The young man had to give up his bed for us, and he was sleeping in a sleeping bag on the floor across the room from us. And we were in our sleeping bags on the bed. And my partner was complaining that something was kicking the bed. And I said, no, there's nothing kicking the bed. Everything's fine. I don't feel a thing. And he accused me of doing it again. Like he thought I was messing with him. I said, seriously, look at me. I'm in my sleeping bag. How can I be kicking the bed? And just then the bed picked up, flew across the room, slammed down on the floor, and broke into pieces.
Wow.
I mean, there was over 500 pounds on that bed.
Wow.
But, it wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a spirit. I am certain, because of all the energy that had been in that home, that was still in that home,
right.
It was that young man who was really upset about having to give up his bed.
Wow. Right.
Right. And he wasn't mentally ill.
Right.
He was just an upset adolescent.
That's right. Which is, I mean, when psychiatrists don't do projective tests on adolescents anymore, I mean, they'll do non-projective testing, but in terms of projective testing, Rorschachs and stuff like that, they don't do it because they all come out psychotic. Because adolescence is a time when you lose your mind. There's no question, and so on some level. So yeah, and the energy is just incredibly strong, and who knows? I mean, who knows how that works? Like you said, in terms of physics and stuff like that. Who knows the power in something like that? Yep. Yeah. And perhaps we'll learn as time goes by. Maybe there'll be a way to perceive that.
I believe that once we have a unified field theory for physics, where we can bridge the gap between physical or Newtonian physics and quantum physics, because
Yep.
right now there's a gap there that we don't understand.
Right.
Once we can do that, I think it's going to unlock an awful lot of answers to
Right.
faith, to the paranormal. I
Right.
think it's going to allow us to do things that we can't even begin to imagine yet.
Right. 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 And that's, you know, it's funny because that is perfectly in line with, you know, in terms of my training as a Dominican, because, you know, some people think that religion and science are inimical, or that they're separate, or that religion should be afraid of science. And certainly in the Dominican tradition, there's none of that. That seeking what's true. Truth is never, and never, any kind of truth is never in variance with God. You know, and or with creation. It's just a deeper understanding, finding that deeper understanding. You know, and when the church or anything else has, you know, advocated for not seeking that truth, Galileo and stuff like that, it's gotten into trouble. But when it has sought truth, like you know, and accepted that truth, you know, no matter where it comes from, then, you know, that's healthy and whole and a good thing.
Sure, science is a tool for understanding.
Yep.
And I believe that whether it be science, philosophy, art, music,
Yep.
they're all different ways of the human mind trying to come to grips with God's creation,
Yep.
and perhaps with God himself.
Yep. And with ourselves.
Absolutely.
And with ourselves, who we are and why we're here. And yeah.
Let me ask you in our final moments here.
Yep.
With your background, how would you recommend to people that they protect themselves from the paranormal?
Yeah. I would recommend that they have a spiritual practice, and it doesn't have to be Judeo-Christian, but a way of spending time twice a day or once a day in some sort of contemplation or meditation or prayer, where they center themselves and ground themselves. And that could, or it could be, it doesn't have to be, you know, static. It doesn't have to be sitting in a chair. It could be walking in the woods. It could be standing on the earth and taking off your shoes. And I mean, they've done studies with people that panic attacks to take off your shoes and stand on the earth and root and imagine yourself like a tree rooted in the earth, grounding yourself. I would say that's incredibly important. And if they happen to come from a spiritual perspective, sure, absolutely incorporate spiritual or religious practices that, you know, like using incense or using holy water or using rosaries or using, for that matter, you know, objects from your grandparents, something, you know, that are beloved, or pictures that can protect you, you know, like images of saints. I mean, what is, you know, parents are pictures of our parents and grandparents whom we loved, you know, they're just like having a picture of a saint. So having both external things that serve to protect you and remind you of goodness, and then also having a spiritual practice that sort of, I mean, I spend an hour in the morning and a half an hour in the evening doing this, or I couldn't do what I do in terms of being a therapist, because it's you know, it is emotionally very draining. I'm entering every hour I enter a different person's, you know, emotional life, and it can be, you know, it can be draining or painful or scary for that matter. And to be incredibly grounded. And again, I'm you know, I'm not the exemplar of this, that's for sure. But to everybody, to have a spiritual practice of some sort that puts you in touch with whatever's true and good and whole and holy and God. That's my definition of God.
Right.
So,
yeah, for me, spirituality comes from within. It's a personal relationship with however you conceive of God.
Yes. Yeah.
Whether you'd say the universe or God or Allah or Krishna or whatever.
Right.
It doesn't matter. It's that connection with something greater than you.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
And maybe religion can lead you to that. Mm-hmm. But as you said, it's these other things, these external things that help feed that connection inside of yourself.
Yes, that's right.
That's what matters.
That's right.
And
that's right.
I think you have given wonderful advice. Thank you. We say the same exact thing when it comes to psychic grounding. for people who are overwhelmed by their empathic abilities and suffering from anxiety is to go out in your bare feet and root yourself. And I always say, you picture like a white rod going down through the top of your head and deep into the ground like a lightning rod. And then just let all that energy drain out of you and let the earth fill you up again.
That's right. Yeah.
And there's actual scientific proof that that barefoot connection on earth, on grass, is incredibly helpful.
Absolutely. And really works for anybody who has panic attacks.
Absolutely.
Because panic attacks is leaving yourself. It's flying off into another place, and so the grounding is infinitely helpful.
Well, Al Widziewicz, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been fascinating for me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm honored.